Welcome to Scarlet Tavern. Grab a drink, take a seat, and let's begin. On tonight's episode, we are out of this world, quite literally. It's time for part 2 of our deep dive into Heaven's Gate, the cult that was so convinced that a UFO was coming to pick them up, they packed their bags and put on their freshest sneakers. If you thought things couldn't get any weirder than last time, well, buckle up, Buttercup, because this time we're getting into the nitty-gritty details of their alien obsession. So sit back, relax, and prepare to have your mind probed as we explore the final days of one of the wackiest cults in history. This is Scarlet Tavern. All right, we are back. Part 2. Always good to have a second probing. So, um, I like our unique intro quotes. I thought that one was a pretty good one. But yeah, so part 2 of Heaven's Gate. This one we're gonna get into the taping of Doe's final exit. What Doe and T tell all of their followers. We're gonna talk about Tila. We will be discussing the actual suicide, and then we kind of wrap it up with the aftermath, the call to the sheriff's office, the anonymous tip, and then everything in the media about them. So, without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump right into it.
So can we name this Heaven's Gate Part Doe?
No.
Yeah. No. Oh, goodness. On March 19th and 20th, 1997, Marshall Applewhite taped himself in Doe's final exit, speaking of mass suicide and the only way to evacuate this Earth. After asserting that a spacecraft was trailing Comet Halley-Bopp and that this event would represent the closure to Heaven's Gate, Applewhite persuaded 38 followers to prepare for the ritual suicide so their souls could board the supposed craft. Applewhite believed that after their deaths, an unidentified flying object, also known as a UFO, would take their souls to another level of existence above human, which he described as being both physical and spiritual. Their preparations included each member videotaping a farewell message. Scholars disagree over whether the theology of Heaven's Gate is fundamentally either New Age or Christian in nature. Benjamin Zeller has argued that the theology of Heaven's Gate was primarily rooted in evangelicalism, but with New Age elements, and a hermeneutic interpretation of the Bible.
Hermeneutics. Hermeneutics. God.
Hermeneutics.
It's
help us.
No,
We've
it's
lost our ability.
it's hermeneutics. It's the
Yes.
it's the knowledge that deals with interpretation mostly of the Bible or literary texts.
Gotcha. That word, that word, interpretation of the Bible read through the lens of extraterrestrial contact. Initially, the group had been told that they would be biologically and chemically transformed into extraterrestrial beings and would be transported aboard a spacecraft, which would come to Earth and take them to heaven, referred to as the next level. When Bonnie Lou Nettles, who is now known as T, died of cancer in 1985, the group's doctrine was confounded because Nettles was allegedly chosen by the next level to be a messenger on Earth, yet her body had died instead of leaving physically to outer space. Their belief system was then revised to include the leaving of consciousness from the body as equivalent to leaving the Earth in a spacecraft.
So this here. So Doe and T, their whole thing was they were supposed to all die together and ascend and blah 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 blah. Well, she fucking just gets cancer out of nowhere, ends up getting, because, and you'll see most cults don't believe, they only believe in holistic medicine. They don't believe in anything to do with going
Correct.
to doctors and all of that. So she just dies from this, and Marshall is like, what the fuck do I do? She was supposed to be. So he ends up telling them that she ascended before them to make way, and we'll see later, I believe it talks about it later, is that she is going to be the one to guide the comet and the UFO to them. That she had to basically go ahead to prepare the way. So he was able to fucking spin it like it was nothing.
Spin it. Yep, like they do. That's what they do. Spin it. So the group declared that they were against suicide, as they defined suicide in their own context to mean to turn against the next level when it is being offered, and believed their human bodies were only vehicles meant to help them on their journey. Suicide, therefore, would be not allowing their consciousness to leave their human bodies to join the next level. Remaining alive instead of participating in the group suicide was considered suicide of their consciousness. In conversation, when referring to a person or a person's body, they routinely use the word vehicle.
So this here, they literally spun suicide. So he literally got them to believe that remaining alive when you were being offered the chance to go to the next level was considered suicide. And that everything that they were taught growing up in suicide was exactly the opposite. Which is how he convinced 39 fucking people to kill themselves. And I believe it was everybody. I think we're going to get into this, but I believe it was everyone over the age of 18. He apparently had enough morals to not kill children.
Where they say silver-tongued devils.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know? So the members of the group gave themselves three-letter names with the suffix ODY that they adopted in lieu of their original given names, which defines, quote, children of the next level. This is mentioned in Applewhite's final video, Doe's Final Exit, which was filmed March 19th and 20th, 1997, just days prior to the suicides. They believed that to be eligible for membership in the next level, humans would have to shed every attachment to the planet. This meant all members had to give up all human-like characteristics, such as their family, friends, gender, sexuality, individuality, jobs, money, and possessions. The evolutionary level above human, Telah, was a physical, corporeal place, another world in our universe, where residents live in pure bliss and nourish themselves by absorbing pure sunlight.
Again, they're solar powered.
100%. 100%. At the next level, beings do not engage in sexual intercourse, eating or dying, the things that make us mammalian here. Heaven's Gate believed that what the Bible calls God is actually a highly developed extraterrestrial.
Interesting.
Yeah. Members of Heaven's Gate believed that evil space aliens, there you go, called Luciferians,
Mm-hmm.
falsely represented themselves to Earthlings as God and conspired to keep humans from developing. Technically advanced humanoids, these aliens have spacecraft, space time travel, telepathy, and increased longevity. They were holograms to fake miracles, carnal beings with gender. They stopped training to achieve the kingdom of God thousands of years ago. Heaven's Gate believed that all existing religions on earth had been corrupt by these malevolent aliens. Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Although these basic beliefs of the group stayed generally consistent over the years, the details of their ideology were flexible enough to undergo modification over time. There are examples of the groups adding to or slightly changing their beliefs, such as modifying the way one can enter the next level, changing the way they describe themselves, placing more importance on the idea of Satan, and adding several other New Age concepts. One of these concepts was the belief of extraterrestrial walk ins. When the group began, Applewhite and Nettles taught their followers that they were extraterrestrial beings. However, after the notion of walk ins became popular within the New Age subculture, the two changed their tune and began describing themselves as extraterrestrial walk ins. The idea of walk ins is very similar to the concept of being possessed by spirits. A walk in can be defined as an entity who occupies a body that has been vacated by its original soul. Heaven's Gate came to believe an extraterrestrial walk in as a walk in that is supposedly from another planet. Yeah. The concept of walk ins aided Applewhite and Nettles in personally stating from what they considered to be clean slates. In this so called clean slate, they were no longer considered by members of this Heaven's Gate group to be the people they had been prior to the start of the group, that had taken on a new life. This concept gave them a way to, quote, erase their human personal histories as the histories of souls who formerly occupied the bodies of Applewhite and Nettles. Over time, Applewhite also revised his identity in the group to encourage the belief that the walk-in that was inhabiting his body was the same that had so to Jesus 2,000 years ago. Similar to Nestorianism, this belief stated that the personage of Jesus and the spirit of Jesus were separable. This meant that Jesus was simply the name of the body of an ordinary man that held no sacred properties, that was taken over by an incorporeal sacred entity to deliver next level information.
So
basically saying he was just a nobody and was possessed by an alien.
Not necessarily. Nestorianism is a belief in actual Christianity. It's not something that Marshall made up. Nestorianism is where certain sects, this mainly happened in Asia and Syria. They believed that Jesus and the Holy Spirit were, or the Spirit of Jesus were two separate beings. That basically the Son of God and Jesus were related, but they were not the same person. And that they worked in tandem. Again, that was mostly in Asia and Syria, their versions. And where I get this is, of course, we know that in Asia and Syria, biblically, that it was the prime area where the disciples went. Where when they went off to do their thing after Jesus was crucified, Syria was one of the main areas. They would have reached Asia at some point. And of course, then Asia, of course, at that time you had Buddhism as well as a few others. And then with Syria, they had they had a bit of Islamic belief there, but when Christianity came over, I believe that this kind of was molding of two religions, and they didn't believe in Jesus being the one true. It was two separate people.
Interesting. Another New Age belief Applewhite and Nettles adopted was the ancient astronaut hypothesis. The term ancient astronauts is used to refer to various forms of the concept that extraterrestrials visited Earth in the distant past. Applewhite and Nettles took part of this concept and taught it as the belief that aliens planted the seeds of current humanity millions of years ago and have come to reap the harvest of their work in the form of spiritually evolved individuals who will join in the ranks of flying saucer crews. Only a select few members of humanity will be chosen to advance to this transhuman state. The rest will be left to wallow in the spiritually poisoned atmosphere of a corrupt world.
I'm glad you said transhuman, because I'm sure people, like, especially with everything that they're doing, you want to say like transhuman.
Yeah.
But yeah, so now I will say this ancient astronaut hypothesis is not just popular with Doe and T. This has been popular throughout history. You actually, I mean, we have an entire show, Ancient Aliens, about
with,
this.
What's his name with the crazy hair?
Yeah, Ben, what's his name? I forget what his name is.
What's his what?
The guy, I forget what his name is.
He's a Greek guy.
He's fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
He's like Nesostopoulos or something like that.
Yes. Not saying it's aliens.
It is Giorgio Sakalos.
Yes. Yes.
So
I'm gonna put this out there. If we ever discover aliens and we ask them, "Have you visited Earth before?" "Oh yeah, we've visited many times in the past."
That man's gonna be hailed as a god.
Yeah, and that man and all the ancient astronaut theorists should be the first ones to go visit the home world of the aliens, because at this point they've kind of earned it.
So this whole thing, and again, we have an entire show. If you guys have not watched Ancient Aliens, go watch it, because at the very least it's entertaining, because he's hilarious. And I think so obviously he believes in this theory, but he also knows he has a show, and he kind of puts on a show as well. So he kind of amplifies everything, because he goes to Comic-Cons and all of that stuff. So, but he puts on this big show. But the belief is that, like, the Mayan calendar was actually written by ancient aliens. The pyramids were built by aliens, because how could the Egyptians build something so magnificent and so ahead of their time with simple tools? So there, all of that stuff is kind of plays into there. And my dad and I were talking about the other day, and I mentioned this to the rest of the group, that we have rediscovered Roman concrete.
Yes.
Where they create it with this salt water, and it's
limestone.
Yeah, the limestone's in there, and when water hits it, the limestone activates and fills in the gaps. And that's why these Roman structures have been standing for thousands of years. And so a lot of people believe that stuff, and of course now that we have figured this technology out, what scientists are hoping is that we can start using it to build bridges and stuff, and it would save us a shit ton of money, because it would just self-repair. But that they believe that all of this stuff, this limestone and all of that, how back in that time did they have the genius to figure out how to do this? So people are
the
like,
Romans
well,
definitely did. The Romans
oh
were
yeah,
very
they were very smart.
pragmatic and they were smart. They were smart, but they were also very adaptable.
Yeah,
Like they yeah, I mean, like the ancient Greeks, they would philosophize about this and that. The Romans would just like,
do it.
how do I defeat this? Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's where this whole concept comes from, is just all these things that have happened in the past. They couldn't have happened without aliens' help, and so it's not just Doe and T. This is people are still believing this today. And I mean, yeah, you can kind of see where people come from. Do I believe the ancient astronaut hypothesis? No. Do I believe aliens exist? We have established this. Yes. I think it's very, very, very fucking ignorant of us to uh, claim that we are the only intelligent life in the universe. That is very ignorant. Um, so, but yeah, so this ancient astronaut is not just them; it is throughout history.
All right. So only the individuals who chose to join Heaven's Gate, follow White and Nettle's belief system, and make the sacrifices required by membership would be allowed to escape human suffering.
This is my favorite part.
According,
the we're getting into the process, and guys, when you see this process, you are going to lose your fucking mind.
yeah, this is as I'm looking this over, I'm like, wow. So, according to Heaven's Gate, once the individual has perfected himself through the process, in quotes, there were 4 methods to enter or graduate to the next level. The first one is physical pickup onto a Tila spacecraft and transfer to a next level body aboard that craft. In this version, what Professor Zeller calls a UFO version of the rapture, an alien spacecraft would descend to Earth and collect Applewhite, Nettles, and their followers, and their human bodies would be transformed through biological and chemical processes to perfected beings. This and other UFO-related beliefs held by the group have led some of the observers to characterize the group as a type of UFO religion.
Oh shit.
The second step is natural death, accidental death, or death from random violence. Here, the graduating soul leaves the human container for a perfected next level body. The third being outside persecution, that leads to death. After the deaths of the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas, in the events involving Randy Weaver at Ruby Ridge, Applewhite was afraid the American government would murder the members of Heaven's Gate.
Which, have no fear. Have no fear. We will be covering Waco and Ruby Ridge.
Definitely.
Because those are big ones.
Definitely.
The Branch Davidians are pretty fucking out there too. But that'll be an interesting one for us to cover, because both of those were handled horribly by law enforcement, and having our view from law enforcement officers, I think those will definitely be some interesting ones.
Yeah, and what I find interesting in that whole thing, which I guarantee we'll talk in depth about when we get into those two, without Ruby Ridge, we would not have had the outcome in Waco.
Correct.
Probably not.
I guarantee. I guarantee we wouldn't have.
Yeah, that will be coming soon. We will be doing both of those soon. We'll probably cover, since the chronological events, we'll cover Ruby Ridge, then Waco.
Yeah, definitely. So then the fourth step is willful exit from the body in a dignified manner. Near the end, Applewhite had a revelation that they might have to abandon their human bodies and achieve the next level as Jesus had done. This occurred on March 22nd and 23rd, when 39 members died by suicide and, quote, graduated.
So with this is him basically taking their mass suicide as the equivalent of the crucifixion of Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's saying Jesus left his earthly body and graduated into an alien. My thing is, so you want to talk about theological standpoints, is Jesus supposedly died on the cross, rose to have, or according to him, rose, took his new body. Why did that same body come back and show himself to the disciples and everything else?
Yeah.
Well, and that's like I said at the beginning of part one. You know, why didn't Doe do that? You know, supposedly from the emails that you got, he's been here several countless times.
He's been here 5 times. Doe,
5
Doe,
times.
Doe, if you're listening to this, we would like an interview.
Step
with
it
you.
up, man.
We would like an interview.
Yeah,
I want to see the holes in your hands.
I mean,
since you are Jesus.
Yeah, Jesus got you beat, bro. He got you beat.
Yeah, he's had more people die for him than you have.
Wow.
I mean,
yeah.
Christian
Facts.
Crusades. Just saying.
Crusades, yeah.
I'm actually reading a book about one of the lesser-known crusades, the Cathar Crusade.
Yeah. So Jesus has had more people die for him than you. So step it up, Doe.
Come on, Doe. So in a group open only to adults over the age of 18, there you go. There's your answer. Members gave up their possessions and lived in ascetic life devoid of indulgences. The group was tightly knit and everything was communally shared. In public, each member of the group always carried a $5 bill and a roll of quarters.
Yeah.
8 of the male members of the... Go ahead. Do you know
the
the significance to that?
So it's just, I think it's, if I remember right, hold on. I'm
tolls.
Yeah, there was.
I'm just curious if it's like the same thing as having to pay the ferryman and
if I remember right, it is.
Okay. Except this is interstellar.
Yeah. I'm gonna try and look. I believe that is why
so maybe
they
that's
did
his
it.
Cousin. So that's the cousin, maybe. So imagine how pissed he is. I got to underworld and my cousin got interstellar travel.
Oh no! That's what it was. So it was actually a quote from Mark Twain.
Okay.
And Mark Twain wrote, Twain was very cynical about religion and once wrote that the fate to get to heaven on the tail of a comet was $5.75.
Interesting.
Because Mark Twain was very well known as being an atheist.
Okay.
And so he said it cost $5.75 to get to heaven on the tail of a comet. So because of that, that's why they carry that.
And that's why they're going on the tail of Halley's Comet.
Correct.
Interesting.
So Mark Twain thrown in there.
Yeah, way to go. So 8 of the male members of the group, including Applewhite, voluntarily underwent castration. Nope. As an extreme means of maintaining the ascetic lifestyle.
So, and I'll just say, so nowadays we do have castration for, in some states, for sexual offenders that sexually assault minors. Nowadays they actually have chemical castration, and they inject you with a chemical. It eliminates all ability to produce the testosterone hormone, which in
Correct.
turn believes that you will, obviously without testosterone, you cannot produce any sperm. Therefore, you do not feel the urges to sexually assault these. This is the 90s. They just did chemical castration maybe 10 years ago. This means,
Yeah.
and I guarantee you, so the way castration technically works is like, even if you do physical castration, you are only cutting the reproductive portion of the testicles. You're not chopping them off. You are removing the part that does produce the testosterone. I highly doubt they surgically did anything. I guarantee you they took a butcher knife, took a cleaver, chopped those dangly bits off, and
Just did it like they do to cattle.
And Marshall Applewhite's saggy balls were flopping all over the ground.
With
Fucking gilded them.
with
Yeah.
cattle, they just put a band around the ball sack.
So, and of course that ascetic lifestyle is no pleasures. So
Yeah.
no, like they couldn't even go see a movie if they wanted to. They weren't allowed to do that either. Everything was taken from them.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Couldn't read books. They were not allowed to read books.
Yeah.
Wow. So
Ben would
the
hate
group initially, yeah, right. So they wouldn't have access to OnlyFans either then. So, man. So the group initially attempted castration by having one of its members, a former nurse, perform the castration, but this attempt was unsuccessful. It almost resulted in the patient's death and caused at least one member to leave Heaven's Gate.
They said,
was
nope,
like,
I
nope.
will keep my fucking nuts.
I know, right? Gone. I'm gone. Nope.
I'm going to OnlyFans.
Yes. Every castration that followed the first one was done in the hospital. Way to go. At least they got that right.
Yeah.
I mean, they learned. So the group earned revenue by offering professional website development, OnlyFans, under the business name Higher Source.
And there you go, Ben. That is where they got the money to be able to purchase this mansion.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
by all accounts, they had some very knowledgeable people in this cult who were, I mean, we've seen their website. They had a graphic designer do that. So they had people that were able to make a pretty good income from the 90s.
Yeah, and especially the 90s, website development was a new thing, so they could charge top dollar.
They were on the cutting edge.
Really? Really?
Sorry,
That's a low blow.
Sorry, I went a little nuts with that one.
That was below the belt, dude. That was below the belt.
Never mind.
Go ahead.
Nope, keep going.
So the cultural theorist Paul Virilio described the group as a cyber sect due to its heavy reliance on computer-mediated communication prior to its collective suicide. To kill themselves, members took phenobarbital mixed with applesauce or pudding and washed it down with vodka. Well, all right.
So
After
phenobarbital is a anti-seizure med.
Yeah.
It also does treat insomnia as well, and also treats sorry, off the top of my head, benzodiazepine and alcohol withdrawal as well. They are heavy barbiturates.
Yeah.
Heavy barbiturates.
Yeah. No joke for sure. So after ingesting the applesauce pudding mix, they secured plastic bags around their heads to induce asphyxiation. All 39 were dressed in identical black shirts and sweatpants, brand new black and white Nike Decades athletic shoes, and armband patches reading Heaven's Gate Away Team.
That's where we're gonna dress up for Halloween. The Heaven's Gate
yes.
Heaven's Gate Away Team.
Yes. And this apparently is for Ben because it's one of the many instances of the group's use of the nomenclature of the fictional universe of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Hey, each member carried a $5 bill and 3/4 in their pockets. According to former members, this was standard for members leaving the home for jobs, and a humorous way to tell us they all had left the planet permanently. I don't see how that's humorous.
Unless you're an English major.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Well, it'll get into it here too. There are two different reasons why they did it.
So the $5 bill was for covering the cost of vagrancy laws, and the quarters were for calling home from payphones. Although another former member known as Sawyer stated that it was a reference to a Mark Twain story, which said $5.75 was, quote, the cost to ride the tail of a comet to heaven, close quote. After each one died, a living member would arrange the body by removing the plastic bag from the person's head, followed by posing the body so that it lay neatly in its own bed, with faces and torsos covered by a square purple cloth for privacy. In an interview with Harry Robinson, the two surviving members said that the identical clothing was a uniform representing unity for the mass suicide, while the Nike Decades were chosen because the group, quote, got a good deal on the shoes, close quote. Yes.
So, and what's funny is after this, Nike pulled the Nike Decade and never made them again.
Really?
When this story of this came out and what they were wearing, they pulled the Nike Decade, and if you were able to buy a Nike Decade, they're worth thousands of dollars because they were never made again after this.
Well, they're out of this world, bro.
Too soon.
Too soon.
The belief is that these two people that are the two surviving members are the ones that are running the website that I talked to. That's the belief. Okay. Nobody can confirm it because they
were sending the emails.
Correct. They won't confirm it, but that is from the research people have done. That is what people believe, that it is a husband and wife that survived. They take their place and do what they're supposed to do, and they're visited by Doe 5 times apparently. They
interesting. So Applewhite apparently was also a fan of Nikes, and therefore everyone was expected to wear and like Nikes within the group. Heaven's Gate also had a saying, "Just do it," echoing Nike's slogan.
But they said, "Just do it."
Just do it. They pronounced D-O as do as dough to reflect Applewhite's nickname.
They literally
just
said,
do it, man.
They said, "Just do it."
Just do it. That's awesome.
Come on, Nike, give me a Heaven's Gate one-off.
Right? I mean, this would be awesome. Nike, you're missing an opportunity, bro. The 39 adherents, 21 women and 18 men between the ages of 26 and 72, are believed to have died in 3 groups over 3 successive days, with remaining participants cleaning up after each prior group's death. The suicides occurred in groups of 15, 15, and 9 between approximately March 22nd and March 26th. Among the dead was Thomas Nichols, brother of the actress Nichelle Nichols, who is best known for her role as Uhura.
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 Ahura.
Uhura.
Uhura.
Star
Uhura.
Trek.
We speaking
In
English.
the original television series of Star Trek,
Which it
Uhura.
was very well known back then. She came out and made statements and everything, claiming she didn't know her brother was part of Heaven's Gate and blah blah blah. But apparently that is why they use Star Trek quotes and stuff a lot, because of his relation to her.
okay.
And as far as I
Interesting.
know, she really didn't do much acting after that because of this. She kind of obviously had some issues with her brother killing himself.
Oh yeah. Well, where was Scotty when they needed him?
Yeah.
You know,
Beam me up.
beam me up, Scotty. Leader Applewhite was the third to last member to die. 2 people remained after him and were the only ones found with bags over their heads and not having purple cloths covering their top halves. Before the last of the suicides, similar sets of packages were sent to numerous Heaven's Gates affiliated or formerly affiliated individuals, and at least one media outlet, the BBC department responsible for Louis Theroux's Weird Weekends, for which Heaven's Gate had earlier declined participation. Among those in the list of recipients was Rio D'Angelo. The package D'Angelo received on the evening of March 25th, as other packages sent had, contained 2 VHS videotapes, one with Doe's final exit and the other with the farewell messages of group followers. It also contained a letter stating that, among other things, quote, "We have exited our vehicles just as we entered them." D'Angelo informed his boss of the contents of the packages and then received a ride from him from Los Angeles to the Heaven's Gate home in Rancho Santa Fe so he could verify the letter. D'Angelo found a back door intentionally left unlocked to allow access and used a video camera to record what he found. After leaving the house, D'Angelo's boss, who had waited outside, encouraged him to make calls alerting the authorities. The San Diego County Sheriff's Department received an anonymous tip through the 911 system at 3:15 p.m. on March 26th, suggesting they check on the welfare of the residents. Days after the suicides, the caller was revealed to be D'Angelo. And then we have a transcript that says, "Caller, yes, I need to report an anonymous tip. Who do I talk to?" Sheriff's Department, okay, this is regarding what? This is regarding a mass suicide, and I can give you the address. San Diego County 911, call March 26, 1997 at 3:15 Pacific Standard Time. The lone deputy who first responded to the call entered the home through a side door, saw 10 bodies, and was nearly overcome by a pungent odor. The bodies were already decomposing in the hot California spring.
Okay, so with this,
And
we as law enforcement officers have seen numerous dead bodies.
and if you haven't, I will tell you this: that is an odor that you will never ever forget.
So
Ever.
So I will say, like, you have, and the smell of just a regular dead body is one thing. Let's say what a nurse smells when somebody dies and they take them and blah blah blah. So we're from Florida originally. Florida heat gets just as bad as California, and
Yes, it does.
when you have a body in that heat, not only does it start to smell, but it will start to swell. And eventually, if you were to touch said body, it will explode.
It will explode.
Like a whale washed up on shore.
Yeah, it is. And again, like he said, it is a smell you will never forget. I will, as bad as it is, it does get easier. The more you do it, you become desensitized to it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think it's more of a. Go ahead.
Your first time ever walking into some type of dead body, you're gonna fucking puke or be pretty close to it. I puked my first time.
Close. Pretty close. I didn't, fortunately, but man, you could feel it in the back of your throat the whole time. You know? And then after the second, after the third, by that point, it's like, ugh, I really don't like these, but all right, let's do this.
Yeah.
So, let's see. After a cursory search by 2 more deputies found no one alive, they retreated until a search warrant could be procured. All 39 bodies were ultimately cremated. I mean, probably the best thing because there wouldn't be much left of them.
Well, yeah. So I will say that technically they wouldn't need a search warrant.
No,
because they have extenuating circumstances to be able to enter the house, clear the house, and see what caused these deaths. I think they knew who these people were, and this was a CYA. This was a cover your ass and get a search warrant so that if there is anybody remaining alive, we can charge them with what we need to.
Yeah. Yeah. The Heaven's Gate deaths were widely publicized in the media as an example of mass suicide. When the news broke of its relation to Comet Hale-Bopp, the co-discoverer of the comet, Alan Hale, drawn into the story. Hale's phone never stopped ringing the entire day. He chose not to respond until he spoke the next day at a press conference after researching the details of the incident. Speaking at the Second World Skeptics Congress in Heidelberg, Germany on July 24th, 1998. Dr. Hale discussed the scientific significance and popular lore of comets and gave a personal account of his discovery. He then lambasted the combination of scientific illiteracy, willful delusions, a radio talk show's deception about imaginary spacecraft following the comet, and a cult's bizarre yearning for ascending to another level of existence that led to the Heaven's Gate mass suicides. Hale said that well before Heaven's Gate, he had told a colleague, quote, probably going to have some suicides as a result of this comet. That the sad part is that I was really not surprised. Comets are lovely objects, but they don't have apocalyptic significance. We must use our minds, our reason. News of the 39 deaths in Rancho Santa Fe motivated the copycat suicide of a 58-year-old man living near Marysville, California. The man left a note dated March 27th, which said, I'm going on the spaceship with Hale-Bopp to be with those who have gone before me, and imitated some of the details of the Heaven's Gate suicides as they had been reported. The man was found dead by a friend on March 31st and had no known connection with Heaven's Gate. At least 3 former members of Heaven's Gate died by suicide in the months following the mass suicide. On May 6, 1997, Wayne Cook and Chuck Humphrey attempted suicide in a hotel in a manner similar to that used by the group. Cook died, but Humphrey survived. Excuse me. Another former member, James Perky Jr., died by suicide by a self-inflicted gunshot wound on May 11th. Humphrey, who had survived his first attempt, ultimately killed himself in Arizona in February 1998. Although most people considered the event a mass suicide, sociologist and former member of a cult, was it Janja
Lalique.
Lalique has referred to the event as, quote, murder.
I can see that.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 former members, Mark and Sarah King of Phoenix, Arizona, operating as the Tila Foundation, are believed to maintain the group's website. As of 2017, there has been no evident growth, as after the mass suicide, the group fell into obscurity, relying mainly on their website for recruitment.
So Mark and Sarah King are the ones that I have talked to. They're the ones that I was emailing.
Now, I will say, you would think, considering the mass suicide was because of the comet, anybody that committed suicide before or after using those same theoreticals wouldn't have gone on that same spaceship, because that was the reason they committed suicide while the comet was there.
Correct.
I think, honestly, given after going through this, I think these people just make this. They've been more or less making this stuff up as they go along.
Yeah.
The moment they hit something, they hit a snag in their belief system, they change it to fit it.
Yeah. And I agree. I said it was murder because they were completely, whether it was ultimately their decision to do so or not, they were completely manipulated. And these are people in the lowest point of their life that are clearly already contemplating suicide.
Yeah, and some people are just very easily to open suggestion. Someone charismatic comes along, they play a tune, and they yeah, I mean, this isn't the first time something like this has happened. I think the earliest was this is very hotly debated historically, so I'm sure our viewers will probably fact check me, and I'm okay with that. The Children's Crusade. Who's ever heard of that?
Mm-hmm. We
Uh,
might touch on it.
So, a long story short, this is why it's controversial, because there's very little historical evidence of it. A lot of it comes from fictional sources, but there are some like secondhand accounts. Essentially, supposedly, this blessed child, who was like a child preacher, was just started wandering around Western and Central Europe, preaching to children, and they thought that through their innocence and piety, they could go to the Holy Land and either convince to the Christians, or to himself convert to Christianity. By all accounts, children, according to the sources, children from as far away as Norway were literally just leaving home and running away to join the Children's Crusade. They supposedly they got as far as Venice, and then they were sold. Many of the children were sold into slavery.
And this was we're talking about 1212, I believe it started.
The Pied Piper. Who's ever heard of the Pied Piper?
Yep.
Yeah. That is where the Pied Piper comes from.
That's the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was two boys who claimed to have had visions of or by Jesus, and of course those crusades failed, but yeah, it's nuts. So Heaven's Gate's definitely not the last one that we are going, not the last cult we're going to be discussing. We have quite a few in the works that we want to discuss. I do believe I'm actually not going to give away what I'm going to do next week.
Okay.
But it is going to be a true crime. So viewer discretion is advised for that. But yeah. I think Heaven's Gate's an interesting topic. It's you of course, most cults are black and white. Essentially, it's their own religion, their own beliefs. The leader is God, blah, 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 blah. And Heaven's Gate really threw a wrench in that by introducing aliens and comets and all of that. So they definitely left their mark on history. And they've to be honest, they've kind of fallen by the wayside. If it weren't for podcasts like us and Necronomipod and a few of the others that have covered Heaven's Gate, I don't know how many people would know about them.
Remember, very little, if any.
So, but yeah. Any final thoughts? Anybody before we sign off?
Yeah, I can't think of anything for me, at least.
Yeah, besides really just saying that the whole situation was a shame that these people got roped up into it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. So, with that, I would like to thank you for visiting the Scarlet Tavern. Remember to turn in your glasses, push in your seats, and always tip the bard. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.